So the other day, I was looking through this old Nintendo Power magazine that one of my fans sent me in my PO box, and it just so happened that this had the 2003 Nintendo Power Awards in it, the Game of the Year awards. And I'm looking at the top two sections, and it's like the best GameCube games are Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, followed by Mario Kart Double Dash and Soul Calibur 2, whereas the best GBA games are Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, followed by Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, and Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. And I'm thinking about how all of those are great games, and they're all innovative games in their own right. None of them is quite exactly like other games in the series, and yet all of them come from major franchises that by this point had been going for nearly 20 years. Well, some of them only 10, but you get my point. And it really got me thinking about why is it that we tend to gravitate towards these series? Aside from the fact that every game within them is great, why is it that we want something that's kind of just an advance on something we've had before, like a newer version, a iteration on something we already had? I mean, don't get me wrong, I think that every Zelda game has done enough different and sometimes enough better that it deserves to exist. I think it's great that we have all these new Zelda games, but why is every single one of them the game of the year? Why are they always everyone's favorite when there's plenty of other really great games that come out every year that don't reach those heights? And I think a big part of it is because those games from those franchises are what gave us our tastes in the first place. If you grew up as I did, playing through The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time when you were young, and that game was like mind-blowing to you, and it like felt like this is everything I've ever wanted out of a story, and it was just something that was like the first story that I ever saw that like meant something to me, you know? It was like kind of the first narrative I'd ever cared about, especially in a video game. And so it's hardly surprising that going forward, what I would be looking for in a game is something that reminds me of Ocarina of Time, something that gives me those feelings all over again. And I think the reason that when The Wind Waker was first being announced and it had this huge backlash against the cell art style, it's because people were afraid that it wouldn't give them the same feelings that Ocarina of Time did. You know, that feeling of this more mature and dark story that was able to really like get inside of them in a way that it didn't seem like Wind Waker could with this art style, only to, of course, basically do so. And I mean, make no mistakes that regardless of that graphical style change, The Wind Waker has infinitely more in common with Ocarina of Time than it has not in common with Ocarina of Time. For all of its differences, it is still a very similar game that is good in a lot of the same ways. And so it's not surprising that we keep gravitating towards these franchises, because even if you didn't come into them from the beginning, if the things that those stories did worked back then it's going to work again when they do it again, if they do it just as well. You know, if a new Zelda game comes out that's every bit as good as Ocarina of Time, then it's just going to be for a lot of people what Ocarina of Time was for me. But what I worry about is that as time goes on and the market becomes more saturated and we have more and more different types of games coming out, different types of media, this applies to pretty much all mediums, that those old things sticking around clouds out the ability for new things to come along that could be someone's Ocarina of Time who maybe will never hear about this new thing. Just to give an example, a couple of years ago, maybe it was just last year, Matthewmatosis talked about a game called Space Chem, and I think he made it his favorite game of the year. He called it his favorite game of whatever year it came out. And that game is really nothing like any of the mainstream video games that are out there. But, you know, according to him, and I haven't played the game myself, but everyone who I've seen talk about this game has said that it's basically perfect at what it does. Now, imagine if Space Chem had come out at a time when there was no pre-established idea of what the best game was. If, like, you know, everything was on a level playing field where, you know, something being similar to Mario or being similar to Zelda, or to speak of more modern games, you know, being similar to Uncharted or Assassin's Creed or something, if being similar to those, or Grand Theft Auto for a better example, if being similar to those was not everyone's benchmark for what is the best game, and this game came out and was just amazing and had like the equal amount of push from people to play it, could it have been the next Mario? Could it have been a game that, you know, for people who had no preconception of what a game should be, could it have been the next big deal that would have, you know, inspired all these people, that would have created its own sort of, you know, its own genre, its own franchise? I really worry that there's a sort of prescriptivism that is encouraged by these games that are considered so great, and that, you know, iterating on them is such an easy way, I won't say easy, but it's such a clear way to make the next best game ever, that we don't then go and try to make a totally different best game ever, because people aren't going to respond to it as well as one that we already know people will respond to. Part of what brought all this to mind was watching the latest Mr. Plinkett video about Star Wars Rogue One. In that video, Plinkett outlines that he, like, these 3 aspects that he thinks every movie has to have to be good. And when I saw that, all I could think was, well, how could you possibly think that all movies need these things? Now, I haven't seen Rogue One, so I'm not going to speak for whether or not I agree that the movie is good or bad, but this idea that Rogue One was bad because it didn't have these necessary elements for a film to be good, that I found questionable. Now, if your criticism is that it seemed like Rogue One needed those elements and didn't have them, then that's one thing. But to say that any movie that doesn't have these elements would be bad is a strange claim, because there's so many different ways that a movie could be good. There's so many different ways that any piece of art could be good, you know? And as soon as you start prescribing, like, this is what art needs to be good, proximity to movie I like before, then you're going to start seeing everything become homogenous. And it's really, I mean, if you're just saying that for it to be to your tastes, then it has to be a certain way, that's fine. But what that also means is that your tastes are causing homogeny. And if too many people are not willing to expand their tastes, if no one wants to, you know, break outside and, like, learn to like a new thing, then we're never going to see evolution, you know? Most people, like myself, probably watched Matthewmatosis' video on Space Chem and said, well, that doesn't look like my kind of game, so I'm not going to play it. You know, I have a kind of game, which is basically action RPGs, which is like most of what I play. And when I see a game that's like totally alien to me, I think, well, I'm not even going to try that. But what if I did and loved it? You know, how am I ever going to discover a new thing that could end up meaning something to me if I'm not even going to try? And if I'm trying to hold every game to its proximity to Zelda or to Dark Souls or to Mario, you know, these games, well, I'm not even that big a Mario fan, but these games that I love, if I'm holding everything to be to my taste, then nothing new gets to be made. And the more people think this way, the more the people who actually like the different stuff suffer. Where someone like Matthewmatosis, who really has a very expansive taste in games, and I think he's an invaluable critic for that reason, because we have, you know, even though he loves the consensus masterpieces like everybody else, he has all these great videos on Mario and Zelda and Metal Gear and Dark Souls and hello loud car. Even though he has all these great videos on those, what I think is the most valuable content he puts out is where he also draws attention to games like Space Chem and is like, you know, saying, this is just as good as all those other games I'm talking about. This is every bit as good as Zelda and Mario and these other games I love. And, you know, if more people felt the way he did, then we'd probably get more games that are willing to experiment. And, you know, if more of us were expanding our tastes, more new things would come out, and we would continue to, you know, enjoy those new things because we've expanded our tastes. Now, it's understandable why we're not doing this, because most of us are not really concerned about the advancement of the medium or about them making new things. Like we're not here to put in effort on our part to make new things happen. What we'd rather have is more things to our taste. Most people just want more stuff to be made that's to our taste. That's why everyone's a pundit for their taste. Everyone's constantly, you know, if you think that not enough games are being made now that are to your taste, then all you're going to do is talk about how lame it is that all these new games are not to your taste. You know, you're going to be rallying cry for them to bring back the style that you wanted. as opposed to maybe finding out that there's something else out there for you. But you know, most of us aren't really into entertainment in that kind of like avant-garde way where we feel like we have to be pushing things forward. We really just want to be entertained. We just want art to help us through our fucking lives, to relax and to take in something that, you know, that we know we're going to enjoy, and just to feel something. You know, it's not necessarily about advancing the medium, but it's kind of unfortunate. And, you know, I would love it if there's more people like Matthewmatosis who, if you like something that's different, you know, speak out about it and try to get more of it to happen. Because for someone like him, you know, that Space Chem game maybe is every bit as like life affirming, and it gives him as much out of art as any of us are getting out of Zelda. And it would be a real shame if people like him can't get games like that, because the rest of us are celebrating so loudly about games like Zelda that we just keep perpetuating those getting made as opposed to anything new. And so that's why I find that sort of prescriptivism towards any kind of art to be dangerous. You know, and I understand where it's coming from. I just want it to be more acknowledged that it's like, you know, no, movies do not all need to have these three factors. Those are the three factors that will make a movie suit your taste as you currently understand your taste. But, you know, there's plenty of different things that a movie can and should do. And if anything, I would think you should celebrate the idea that a fucking Star Wars movie came out that wasn't exactly like the other Star Wars movies, you know. But that's neither here nor there. I haven't seen the film myself. So anyways, my message to everybody is go out there, try to expand your taste if you're someone who has time for it. You know, if you don't care that much, you just want to see stuff you like, just go seek out stuff you like. Just, you know, be wary of the fact that celebrating stuff for doing the same thing over and over again is how you're going to perpetuate the cycle of the same thing happening over and over again.